Good evening. This is Maestro Cretella with the Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today, we have a 1v1 on Leviathan Hive. Our first player today is none other than Maestro Cretella, playing as Sindri, Trollface, Chaos Sorcerer. The Sorcerer is a spell-casting hero. He has Doom Bolts, a long-range damage spell. He can also teleport in a number of different ways. He has his personal teleport as well as his anything else teleport. He also has a few manipulation and control abilities. My opponent is Flaming, playing as the tanky melee hero. Yes, he is a tanky melee hero, but he's actually playing as the Force Commander, who is a tanky melee hero. He can tank damage, tie things up, disrupt melee units by using Battle Cry. That's an ability that allows him to do special attacks with every strike. He's pretty tough, particularly for the Sorcerer. So, anyway, this goddamn matchup. Been playing it a lot lately. It's really incredibly hard. And it's happening because I play the Sorcerer, other people play the Force Commander, a lot of them do. So I'm starting to get pretty well practiced in it, actually, but it really is a very hard matchup. Now, some of the ways this thing works out in the early game, for the most part, I'm going to try to avoid the Force Commander. The Heretics are going to ignore the Force Commander and go for the tax instead. So the Heretics get their Doom Blast in. They won't win in the direct fight if the Force Commander's there to support, and also just in their vanilla form without the Aspiring Champion. But they can just do Doom Blast. That does some burst plasma damage. There, I also use Doom Blast to suppress the Force Commander to control him. And I'm spending Requisition to control the Force Commander, which, of course, I'm spending Requisition on to counter a unit that's not going to bleed at all, but it's just one of the necessary things you need to do to control the Force Commander in this matchup, or really any hero that can be suppressed and is trying to tie things up. So, I was running my Chaos Space Marines over here. I saw the scouts. I was trying to look for those scouts that were running around. Look at the way they're hiding. I'm never going to find them there. We actually have an early infiltration upgrade that's very interesting. And I mean, of course, I know this from when I played the game. But looks like Flaming had an early VP lead, whereas I had basically won the engagements. But, so some of the interesting things about not even just the Sorcerer against the Force Commander specifically, but the Chaos versus Space Marines matchup. There's actually a bit of a rock, paper, scissors dynamic between Chaos Space Marines, Heretics. Actually, let's forget the rock, paper, scissors part. But I'll just say this. The Chaos Space Marines early on, I sent them after the Scouts, in part because they're going to beat the Scouts. And that's kind of one of their best things early on in this matchup, or against Space Marines in general. They're going to beat the Scouts, so you want to try to have Chaos Space Marines engage Scouts. That being said, they slightly lose to Tactical Marines, because Tactical Marines do more damage, they have Kraken Bolts to make them do even more damage, and they have more health. So they slightly beat Chaos Space Marines. I don't want the Chaos Space Marines to engage the tax. I want Heretics to be able to engage the tax, because they'll go in, Doom Blast, do a lot of damage, and that will hopefully get the tax in a situation where they will lose models. Here I made a little bit of a micro-derp, actually meant to Doom Blast, but I had accidentally worshipped. I should get another Doom Blast in here, and even though the Heretics don't exactly win that fight, they do a lot of damage to the Tactical Marines. And then the last thing I was going to say in my explanation of what units beat what. So I want the Heretics to get into melee with the tax because of that plasma damage they will do. Really does a lot of damage to the tax and gets them forced off. And then lastly, Bolter Scouts are going to slightly counter the Heretics, because the Bolter Scouts really should be able to just kite the Heretics infinitely, bleed the models off of them, and the Heretics should never be able to catch up to them. So there's just kind of a dynamic of which units beat what early on in Tier 1. Something I have a pretty good sense of. There, I punished a little bit of Miss-Micro on Flaming's part. I had my Chaos Space Marines just run into Force Melee. I recognized that he was setting up a little too close to me, and I had my Chaos Space Marines run in and Force Melee. And, I mean, that worked temporarily. I bled one of the Devastator models, but he did have support from his Tactical Marines to eventually force off my Chaos Space Marines. Now, I'm going for a build here that I haven't really done that much before. This is a build that was recommended to me by Torpid. There are a lot of good players around, and lately I've mostly been imitating Noisy's build, which is three Heretics, 1 Chaos Space Marine, and a Havoc. The text build is usually 3 Heretics and just the Havoc. I've tried that before, not too much. Very, very cheap. The Noisy build is a bit more expensive, but I feel better. And then this is actually a build that I got from Torpid, and it's even more expensive than the 3 Heretic build because I've got double Chaos Space Marines. But it's just something to try. There are definitely some things I like about the scaling potential of having double Chaos Space Marines, as well as the fact that you can actually really kite with a build like this. Just because Chaos Space Marines with marks do very well against pretty much anything that's not a vehicle. Any kind of infantry do very well against tanks. One thing I find, though, is I usually don't find upgrading to marks a priority in tier 2, however. I usually find getting out other units is more of a priority. Setting up my Havocs in the middle, and I like the way he's using his scouts for intel. He ties up the Havocs, and that's actually a losing melee fight for the scouts, but he just needed to tie up the Havocs. And then he just had the support from the Force Commander and the Tactical Marines. Now we've got a Devastator over here in a precarious position for that, and yet I can't exactly approach it head on. Or can I? I don't have Sigil of the Rift, and it's going to take some time to upgrade it. So instead, I'm doing this. I'm moving in Infiltrated Heretics. I use Doom Bolts to get it down to really low health, and I just wipe it out by moving in Infiltrated Heretics. Now, part of what I did there, first of all, I used the Worship, of course, and I couldn't actually have the Heretics go in for an attack, because then they would start. I wouldn't actually right-click to attack the Devastators, because then the Heretics would start shooting with their auto pistols. That would reveal them, and then they would get suppressed. So I just literally had to do a move order to move close to the Devastators, and then pretty much have them Doom Blast and engage in melee once they were in range. Now, Flaming did pretty well here. I put my Heretics in the position over here because I wanted to try to bait him into retreating through my Heretics. That being said, I wiped attack. I managed to wipe attack anyway. I was actually hoping to wipe a few squads just by positioning those Heretics in a retreat path. He brought them over here trying to run away from them, which was the right choice, but he still left his tacks in a little too long and ended up losing 2 tacks. Or he ended up losing 1 tack. He had 2 tacks, he lost 1. So he's got like no units at this point. And I didn't even realize while I was playing this game just what a strong position I was in as far as my army, basically just the army size and squad count. I guess I wiped 2 squads, so it's not that surprising, but I still didn't really realize it. Like, I don't have the actual knowledge of really just seeing. He's only got 2 squads now. Anyway, having my Chaos Space Marines bash generators, but Flaming did have a significant tech lead on me that might have had to do with, first of all, I think he just had more of a power income. I don't know if this was all the power income that I have, but he had much more generators. He also had just like a shorter build. He had 2 tacks, which is normally considered expensive, but then I had 2 Chaos Space Marines, 2 Heretics, and a Havoc. So my build was expensive. I apparently didn't even put down a full power farm, although I did make sure to node both of the powers so that they wouldn't be easily decapped. So consequently, I have a map control advantage and a VP advantage. 447 to 265 is now evened out at a no-cap game. I've just gotten to Tier 2, but now we have a Dreadnought. And he actually chose to get on multi-melted Dreadnought. He's done this before. He did this in the game that we played before this one. And I'm realizing that it is a very good and very underused choice, because you get a ranged weapon right there that just bled a Chaos Space Marine model in 2 shots. You really can't stick around too much against this multi-melted Dreadnought. It doesn't have the range of an assault cannon, but it's not really something. It's very difficult to kite, because if you try to kite it, you're going to bleed models. Now I have a Havoc upgraded to a las cannon. That's not really. I don't think that's really going to be enough, though. So part of what I'm going to be trying to do now is I'm actually going to try to play a bit of a game of avoidance, basically because I have this Dreadnought here. I don't really want to engage it yet. I want a little more than what I have right now. The only thing I have that can really touch the Dreadnought are my Havocs. I want a little bit more than that. So I'm going to be running around trying to basically avoid flaming, and more specifically avoid the Dreadnought. Certainly I can engage the Tax, engage Bolter Scouts. Force Commander is always scary, and he's just generally one of the biggest problems in this matchup. He's got the Thunderhammer, which actually kind of, in some ways, that's a good thing in this matchup, even though it's also a bad thing. The main thing that's good about it is that it kind of clears the way for me to get a Walker or Dreadnought of my own. Because he's already spent resources to get the Thunderhammer, and once you do that, you're going to be a little more hesitant to spend resources again to switch to the Power Fist, especially considering how expensive the Power Fist is. And as long as he has a Thunderhammer, though, any Walker that I get, whether it's any kind of Dreadnought, doesn't matter whether it's a ranged Dreadnought, a Khorne Dreadnought, or a Blood Crusher, is actually going to counter the Force Commander. And that's really nice, because generally one of the things that's really tough about this matchup is finding things that can reasonably counter the Force Commander. The Force Commander counters a lot of things by himself in this matchup. He really just does a lot by himself. Now again, this is just part of my avoidance strategy. I did not want I'm trying to avoid the Dreadnought, and now my Heretics definitely need to avoid the Force Commander. So they were just running around, they were bashing generators, drawing attention away, and Flaming also doesn't exactly have a lot of mobility or a lot of map control with so few squads. And I've got a significant VP lead right now, 440 to 184. But as you can see, the Dreadnought, again, I need to avoid it pretty much. Certainly, the Chaos Space Marines right now cannot do anything, and look at how much damage they take in each individual shot from that multi-melta. It's pretty scary. Anyway, setting up my Havoc in basically just under Worship. Want it to be a surprise. Chaos Space Marines, unfortunately, are still unupgraded because I prioritize getting more units, and that's kind of what I said. As good as the Mark upgrades are, usually I don't find myself getting them immediately once I get to Tier 2, because I really find it more important to get other kinds of units out on the field. Anyway, this is a little bit tricky. My Havoc is under infiltration, but it's not in a position to actually... It's not actually in the correct position to shoot at the Dreadnought. I have it reset up, and I use chains so that the Force Commander can't do anything, and I warp in my Tzeentch Dreadnought so that I can combine the AV firepower of those two units. The Tzeentch Dreadnought and the Havoc should be what I need to take out his Dreadnought. And that actually is it. So I had a nice victory there. Flaming already going to Tier 3, though. Anyway, I'm now getting a Tzeentch upgrade. Vehicle's gone, so I know that it's probably pretty safe to get the Tzeentch upgrade on my Chaos Space Marines at this point, because what am I going to be dealing with? Tactical Marines, Scouts, as well as the Force Commander. And all of those things are going to actually be countered very, very well by a Mark of Tzeentch Chaos Space Marine squad.
Weapons for the slaves of heresy. Upgrade interrupted. This belongs to chaos now. To chaos.
So I've been doing pretty well to wipe a lot of Flaming's things. Sorcerer, unfortunately, just standing around. He should probably be doing a little bit more. And my las cannon, what I'm actually doing with the las cannon at this point, it doesn't really have much combat purpose. It's not going to kill much. It would actually win against the Scouts, but, I mean, what I actually would like it to do is start bashing generators. That was my intention. He's kind of delaying that by having his Scouts tie up my Havocs. That's ultimately a losing battle for the Scouts. The Scouts do not beat Havocs in melee, just a little, not very widely known fact. Although it does buy him time to get the Tax over here, and now I actually can't do anything with my Havocs, because the Tax will beat the Havocs, so I was hoping to destroy a bunch of these generators. I did not get the chance. Instead, I've got my Tzeentch Dreadnought over here bashing generators, and although the Tzeentch Dreadnought is actually very good against anything pretty much, it's good in combat, it's also very good at bashing generators, and surprisingly that actually becomes one of its priorities as well once a vehicle is destroyed. Now, I'm winning this engagement, but I need to prioritize capturing a little bit more. I had a heretic come in there for a flank on the tax, and that flank was actually pretty much unnecessary. I was going to win that engagement. The heretics didn't actually contribute to me winning that engagement much. We actually have a las cannon predator from Flaming. That's somewhat of a surprising upgrade, and in some ways not. It's still actually hitting infantry, as we can see. My impression, though, is that the autocannon is better. That time it missed, so that's the disadvantage of the las cannon predator. Sometimes it will miss infantry, but it does actually seem to hit infantry nevertheless, and it seems to do it more consistently than weapons like Devastator las cannons or missile tax. Now I'm getting a squad of Plague Marines, deciding that I need even more AV to deal with a single Predator. And that seems like overkill, and that may seem like overkill, and to be honest, it might be. I'm actually feeling a little insecure about the Predator, and normally tanks do counter dreadnought, ranged dreadnoughts. Even the Tzeentch Dreadnought, as powerful as it is as an anti-vehicle unit, it is still definitely countered by actual tanks. It does damage nearly as good as this las cannon Predator. And it has more health, but it can't run away. So once the fight ends up going in favor of the Predator can just chase the Dreadnought, and there's nothing the Predator can do. Meanwhile, the Predator can always just micro out of there, kite, run away because it's faster. That is the advantage of a tank. And I feel the Havoc by itself is not enough because the Force Commander is just going to tie it up. That being said, here come actually... Oh, there's some Bloodletters, and I guess I want that there. I really just want the Force Commander to not be able to do anything. I open fire with the Tzeentch. With the Tzeentch Dreadnought. Tzeentch Havocs need to open fire as well, and they do. I teleported them with the Warp Global to get them closer. They weren't really close enough, and that actually ends up being the end of the Predator. That being said, we also have a Terminator call-in from Flaming, and that's absolutely destroying my stuff. Now, notice that he chose to get ranged Terminators. I actually think that's a really good choice. I think sometimes Force Commander players will be too eager to get Assault Terminators when they're not just straight up the better choice over ranged Terminators. There are times when ranged Terminators are actually a better choice. The Force Commander does, of course, get that tactical flexibility of actually being able to choose and getting the option of a melee specialist unit, but sometimes ranged Terminators are the better choice. And I'd say particularly against the Sorcerer is one of them. Since the ranged Terminators do not have to get close, they actually do a lot of damage from far away. And part of what that means is that they're at much lower risk against the Sorcerer, who can subjugate them and chain them, because it's going to actually be a lot harder to do both of those things against ranged Terminators. They will really bleed models on pretty much any squad, whether it's Heretics or Chaos Space Marines. They'll win against all of those, even though Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines are one of the best answers to any kind of super heavy infantry, the Terminators, kind of just by virtue of them being a more advanced unit, a tier 3 unit, are ultimately just better in a direct range fight against Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines. I also have to be very careful, since Terminators are going to be a pretty substantial source of damage against a Chaos Dreadnought. They still do, I don't remember the exact stats, I think it's 34 DPS heavy melee per model. But either way, it's up there. I believe 34 is actually the number. That's pretty respectable. That's almost 100... It's actually more than 100 DPS as a squad, if my memory is right. But either way, they are a substantial source of heavy melee damage. They don't do special attacks, and often it's not a good idea to put them in against dedicated melee units. But they do function as a V. Now, I've still got a VP lead of 309 to 81. Flaming, he's actually built up a decent army. He's got a late-game Assault Marine squad with no levels whatsoever. Very interesting choice, but I think part of what he's going for there is... Well, I've definitely got Chaos Space Marines. Those are going to be one of the biggest threats against the Force Commander, especially Tzeentch Chaos Space Marines. And I'd say, like, normally one of the things that's tough about this matchup are Assault Marines in Tier 1. And a big part of what they're doing is they're tying up either your Havocs or your Chaos Space Marines, which are your answers to the Force Commander. So your answers to the Force Commander are getting countered by the Assault Marines. You normally counter Assault Marines with Heretics, and then those get answered by the Force Commander, because the Force Commander is an answer to so many things in this matchup. So now that I think about it, I didn't actually end up needing the Plague Marines to take out the Predator. So that definitely ended up being overkill. I took out the Predator just with the Havoc and the Dreadnought. So that actually was definitely overkill, and I'm kind of saying that that's definitely a reflective thing. It was a choice that I made in the moment to be sure, to be safe, because I felt insecure about my ability to take on a las cannon Predator with extra armor using just my Havoc and my Dreadnought, given how they could be countered. However, that ended up being an unnecessary purchase, because now I have a squad of Plague Marines that aren't really good for much of the stuff I have to deal with now. And I really could be benefiting more if I had either gone to Tier 3 earlier or bought some kind of different unit entirely that would have much more combat impact after the Predator was destroyed. Anyway, very close call. One more punch would finish off that Chaos Dreadnought. I actually lost track of the micro for a second, but I was able to have my Heretics run in and suppress. Now, I had a significant VP lead, but I'm quickly losing it, and Flaming managed to come back into this game despite never having as many squads as me, although that is often the case in this matchup. Generally, the Chaos player, and specifically the Sorcerer player against the Force Commander player, will actually just have more squads and more units. The overall flow of the game nevertheless tends to go in favor of the Force Commander, who part of it is that he just does so much himself, and it often takes multiple units just to deal with him. So it's now a triple cap against me. Gonna send the Havocs over here, and another great thing about these Terminators is that they do so much damage against all of my squads that they are acting as very strong bodyguards for this VP, and that's basically allowing Flaming to hold 2 VPs. It's very difficult for me to commit to going after his natural VP. And now these Assault Marines are actually Vanguard veterans. And again, unfortunately, what those Vanguards jumped on were Assault Marines. And I tried to have a summoning circle to try to keep my things out on the field, but I'm actually probably going to lose this squad of Assault Marines right here. And I do, so unfortunately that really doesn't help me. Assault Marines, to be honest, I feel they're great in this matchup, and Vanguard veterans possibly even better. And yeah, I mean, at this point, there's not a whole lot for my Plague Marines. Don't really fit in much. They don't do much. They're mostly a capturing unit right now. My Havocs were basically a capping unit at some point, although that was a little more understandable. I needed the Havocs a little bit more when I had them. And now the Dreadnought's in trouble again. And the Dreadnought suddenly very, very well countered, taking vengeance round shots from the Stern Guards. as well as Power Fist hits from the Vanguard veterans. And now I'm suddenly in a freaking terrible situation. I still have the VP lead, but I'm just not in a winning position as far as my units go. I've really got not much that can take on the Force Commander. Most of my things can't take on the Terminators either. And I'm subjugating the Terminators, but this thing is, although this is a major counter to the Terminators, it is slightly overrated as a counter. In part because it really doesn't do a whole lot by itself. You need to follow it up with a combination of many more things, and oftentimes, part of what often happens is just that in the course of an engagement, just that Space Marines will generally has the advantage in the engagement otherwise, that just the subjugate on Terminators usually isn't enough by itself. You need to be in a winning position in the engagement first for that subjugate on Terminators to really, really work out well. And I lose Heretics as well. So now I still have a VP lead, but I've really got like almost nothing. I've got Chaos Heretics, I've got Chaos Space Marines, and a Sorcerer. I really can't fight anymore. I basically can't fight. So I've got Chaos Space Marines going for a back cap on the contested VP. And what else do I have? I've got Heretics. Now, what I did here was literally just subjugating them to get them the hell away. And now I can put my Heretics on the point. I wanted to try to use the Cyclone Missile Launcher on the Predator, but it kind of just derped into the wall and did nothing. So Chaos Space Marines get the cap right here. I've also got 200. I've got 200 red. So what I'm going to do here is use a Summoning Circle Global, and that will deny the point further. I was also hoping to reinforce, but that reinforce from the Summoning Circle, it doesn't happen fast, it doesn't happen instantly like a Call to Boys or a Drop Pod, so you can't really use it in emergency situations like you would normally use those other abilities. If you want to benefit from the reinforcement of the Summoning Circle, you actually really have to use it at the beginning of an engagement while your squad is still healthy, but when you know they're going to take losses. I actually managed to get a double cap in the VPs. I have a double cap in my favor. I'm trying to go for this over here, but the Force Commander is going to finish me off. I was able to get the decap by using the Chains of Torment, but unfortunately the Summoning Circle could only delay these Vanguard veterans for so long. And although I take out a Terminator model, my Heretics over here end up going down. It's a single cap for me, but now it's a 1-to-1 cap, and if you notice, I have nothing on the field. So I conceded. Very tough matchup, but that's just the way it is. Hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.